technical difficulties.
Okay.
So I just want to welcome everybody to this celebration of life for Dad, Frans Coenraad, Oom Boet. It wouldn't be a Coenraad function if it didn't start late. And it also wouldn't be a Coenraad event if it wasn't done at the last minute. Despite the fact that Dad passed 7 months ago, we had all this time to get ready, and just like him, we left everything much closer to when when we're supposed to do it, because our brains just don't work the other way for planning in advance. So. It's just going to be very relaxed and casual. I tried to write an obituary, and it was too long, and then I wrote a eulogy 3 different times, and it was still too long. So when it comes time for me to speak, I'm just going to be winging it. But my cousin Yoka has something prepared. And I just, right now for this second, I just want to thank you all for coming, and everybody that was here early. Thank you all for helping us.
He taught me how to play video poker. Always keep the ace and ditch the other cards. If you want to win the big money. He was so proud to show us that he meanwhile had the best connection in the Caesar's palace. The staff and all the extras he got from the hotel for being such an important customer. He beamed when he was showing us around. I spent several days with him playing on the machines. Sitting next to him, and we had a great time. And at one time, we both won $1,000 each. It was so much fun. Traveling was his life. All the things he had seen and told us about, he also told my sons. Through his stories, they too are very interested in exploring the world, just like he did. When we arrived 2 weeks ago, excuse me. When we arrived 2 weeks ago, it was so strange not to see Oom Boet waiting for us at the arrival hall. He was always there, and he would raise his hand and wave, and he would call, "Hey, Jook." He would be so happy, and he would glow and beam. But this time, no, hey Joke. I'm still confused about him not being there when we were arrived. But I knew and I know that he had left on his last journey to join Tante Corrie and all his relatives. His mom, his dad, his brothers, my father, and all the other relatives who were waiting for him to join them. I started with my speech with Selamat Jalan. This is Malaysian for goodbye, safe journey. This is what I wish you on board Selamat Jalan. And we're now going to play a song written about the goodbyes, this Selamat Jalan. And it's going to play in just a minute.
Er gaat weer iemand van ons heen, die nog onder de waring heeft gelegen, op wie de tropen zonnig scheen, maar die daar is verdreven en naar Holland is gegaan voor een heel nieuw bestaan en een nieuw begin. Voor een Indisch kind. Iedereen staat even stil en houdt zijn adem in. Voor een allerlaatste groet aan een Indisch kind. Selamat jalan. Selamat jalan, selamat jalan, Indisch kind. Vanaf vandaag is alles anders. Vanaf vandaag is er verschil. Dat is altijd als iemand je verlaat, die je nog jaren bij je hebben wil, maar die in de hemel wordt verwacht, nu het leven is volbracht en een nieuwe reis begint voor een Indisch kind. Indisch kind. Iedereen staat even stil en houdt zijn adem in voor een allerlaatste groet aan een Indisch kind. Selamat jalan, selamat jalan, selamat jalan. Iedereen Selamat jalan, selamat jalan, selamat jalan in this game.
Selamat jalan, Boet.
So Yoka, that was so beautiful, and the song is so perfect. We were going to have it printed in English so you guys would know what it said, but it's about there's so many, like my father, like the Bergs and the Comans, the children that were born in Indonesia, and on Flip, those children were born in Indonesia but were Dutch. And then when the war broke out, and a lot of them were interned in concentration camps, they went to Holland. But Indonesia still stays very deep inside of them. And that song basically talks about them being born there, going to Holland, and then when they pass, they go back to Indonesia. Because those children are not just Dutch and they're not just Indonesian, they're Indies. So that was perfect, Yoke. At this time, I'd like to ask Oom Flip, my uncle, Oom Tinus, my dad's youngest brother, was going to be here. He's here for 6 weeks, but he went to Vancouver and he got stuck in a snowstorm. So he's not able to attend after all, but he did write something, and Oom Flip is going to read it for us. Oom Flip.
Ik ben Flip or Phil de Serrière, een neef van Boet en Ontinus. And for this year, his brother was going to come and spend time with them just for the celebration. And because my birthday was in early February, he said, I'm going to be at your birthday because I'm going to be the one at his birthday. So he came from Zoetermeer, and he is like me, like to travel, don't want to hang around too long, it's nowhere. So he went to Vancouver, and he got stuck, you know. So he asked me to write this, but he wrote, and he wants me to show you what he wrote. The whole month of May last year, I was here in LA to visit my brother Boet, who suffered from COVID. Grace and Norman took care after him day and night in the home since February. Every day I visited him, and we talked for hours about our past. The years before World War II, a very happy period, were roughly interrupted by the invasion of the Japanese army. Our family, parents, and 6 children were separated. My father was Richard, that's his oldest brother, they call him D, were sent to prison of war camp, and we, my mother and Hilda, Boet, Henk, Tineke, and me, to a camp where women and children. Both prison camps in the jungle in the mountains of the island of Sumatra for more than 3.5 years. We were humiliated, tortured, and almost starved to death by the Japanese. Our father did not survive the camp. Almost 2 months before liberation in August 1948, he died by hunger and dysentery. Another camp waited us on Java. We lost our house and everything in it, and we were waiting to be repatriated to the Netherlands. It was unsafe for us Europeans to stay in Indonesia. August 1946, we came to the Netherlands in Zandvoort, which is in the Netherlands. There, we 7 persons lived for more than 3 years in a 2-room basement built under the ground. On top was a restaurant. The only way to escape from the miserable circumstances we lived in was to go to the movies to see the glittering wonder of Hollywood. With every shining sun, waving palm trees, the land of our dreams, the idea was born to immigrate to California. After marrying Corey, you and Corey immigrated to your dreamland. You and Corey were happy living here with your 2 children, Grace and Frans. When after a long period of happy years with Corey and the children, she passed away. For you, life lost its glamour. I came every year to visit you from several weeks in February and March. We went to the mall and walked around several times and do some stretching exercises on the rail against the wall just for conditioning. We went to Las Vegas, where you and Corey loved to go. We visited family, went to the opera and concerts. I even learned you to cook for yourself, especially the Indonesian food you liked most. And sometimes you made it for the children. We talked it over every day, and the last May when I visited you, I wished I could talk to you now for the very moment again, but sadly enough, it is not possible anymore. You and your beloved Corey rest now in the soil of your dreams. Rest in peace, Cor and Boet. We love you, Hilda, Tineke, and Tines. And I have to make some comments about this. Tines and I found each other because we both love music. We traveled all over Europe to see concerts. Every opera that's available, we go. And when it comes to the United States, every concert we find out we're going to go. I'm a jazz fan and an opera fan. As long as it's music, I'm happy. You know, my life is like a dream, you know. And I'm so glad to be here too. I love your father.
You loved it too, old Flip.
Okay,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you.
So in a moment, we made a video memorial when we buried Dad in September. We buried him 6 years to the day that we buried Mom. And so we created this memorial for him. I hope you enjoy it.
Though your heart is aching, smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile. Through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever must keep on trying, smiling. What's the use of crying? You find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. You will find that life worthwhile if you just
Don't stop you crying, you'll be alright. Just take my hand, hold it tight. All around you, I will be here. Don't you cry. For I'm so small, you seem so strong. My arms will hold you, keep you safe and warm. This bond between us can't be broken. I will be here, don't you cry. 'Cause you will be in my heart. Yes, you will be in my heart. From this day on, now and forevermore. You will be in my heart. No matter what they say, you'll be here in my heart always. Why can't they understand the way we feel? They just don't trust what they can't explain. I know we're different, but deep inside us, we're not that different at all. And you will be in my heart. Yes, you will be in my heart. From this day on, now and forever. thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary thing that everyone ought to do. I'm living in a kind of dream. I'm happy as a king, and foolish though it may seem to me. That's everything, the mere idea of you, the longing here for you. You'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love. The mere idea of you, the longing here for you. You'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love. There are places I remember all my life. Oh, some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living in my mind. I love them all. Something new. Oh, I know I'll never ever lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I won't stop thinking about them in my life. I love you more.
I'm not good at speaking in public, and that video was the one thing I was able to put together, and the songs say most of it for me and my family, and the pictures tell his story, most of it. And I know, hopefully most of you recognized yourselves in there. I wanted to try and honor everybody. So I just want to give you guys for those who don't know the complete backstory on Dad, just a few little factoids about Dad. I just want to start with his nickname. When Dad was born in Waru, Indonesia, on today's date, well, not today's date, but on this day in 1931, he was the third child born. He had a big little sister, Hilda, and when she was introduced to her new little brother, her broertje is little brother in Dutch. Hilda tried to say the word broertje, but she wasn't able to pronounce her R's So she kept calling him Bucha. Bucha. And that name stuck. And the entire family started calling him Bucha. And he's been known as Bucha ever since, thanks to Tante Hilda. I also want to talk about my father's love for my mother, and how their love affair began, because that's something that he always talked about throughout my lifetime, but also so much towards the end, the last 6-7 years, when my mother started to, her health started to fail, and he talked more and more and was reminiscing more and more about how they met. So when Dad finished school in Holland, the school, when you're finished, you're basically at associate's degree level. You don't finish like a senior in high school. You finish associate's degree. When he was done, he went into selective service. He went into the army. And he joined the Corps Commando Troepen, which are the Green Berets in the Netherlands. He was really proud to be a Dutch Green Beret. When he came to furloughs, he always went home to Zandvoort to be with his family. And he and his sister Hilda, they were really close, always going out. They had the same group of friends. And they were always ready to go out. Stappen, Haarlem, parties, lots of house parties. So at one of those house parties, he saw one girl and was instantly smitten. Despite Dad's easygoing manner, and he was pretty popular, there were a lot of girls interested in him, but he was never interested in them. But when he saw her, he was too shy to even introduce himself. So he asked a mutual friend what her name was. It was Corrie. Corrie Dunlop from Friesland. After that party, when his furlough was over, he went back to his unit and he wrote her a letter. He never mailed it. He carried it in his pocket for a year. The next time he saw her, the next time he had furlough and he saw her, he finally introduced himself, only to find out that she was to be married by the glove to an officer in the Dutch Navy that was stationed off Indonesia. Do you guys know what marriage by the glove means? No. Okay. Marriage by the glove is something that was done in the, I guess it began in the late 1800s, because Indonesia was a Dutch territory. A lot of men would go and make their fortune in Indonesia. You could make good money working in Indonesia. And they would want a bride, but there were so few, it's not PC, but there were so few white women in Indonesia that they would arrange to have someone in their place find a bride and then use a used left glove in place, and that person would stand in their place with the glove and marry the girl that was chosen. And normally that girl that was chosen was of a good family and had a good dowry. That's how it was in olden days. And then I think around the time that mom and dad were courting, it wasn't quite so traditional in that sense. But she was getting ready to marry by the glove. But Dad knew she was his one and only. And he went and he pursued her and he courted her. And despite Mom being engaged, and after Mom and Dad's brief courtship, she did fall in love with him. And she broke the engagement. His name was Lex. The officer's name was Lex. So she broke the engagement, and that was very much to the dismay of her mother, my Oma Ann. Because Oma Ann was really for that glove marriage. But anyway, on September 10th, 1956, they got married in Haarlem, the city where their love affair began. And for 60 years, she was his love, his world, his everything. He was always really proud to have been able to take care of her and my brother and I on that one Air France salary. You know, when they got here to Michigan, they settled in Michigan in 1957, and my dad couldn't get a job to save his life. Back east, he was the wrong color, and he had a really tough time trying to find work. Mom had a really easy time finding work, and Dad almost gave up and wanted to go back. But Mom got kind of mad at him, and she said, "There's no way we're going back. If you want to go back, you go ahead. I'm going to stay here. You brought me all the way over here. This is what you wanted. This is what we're going to do." So from then on, Dad just worked every job that he could find. And then when they took Route 66, went to Southern California with a whole bunch of other Indos in Michigan, looking for better opportunities. He got a job. First, he was mowing the really big lawns in Arcadia. And then he did some odd jobs. And then he got a job at TWA. And he worked in reservations at TWA in downtown. And then they laid him off. I can't remember how long it took, how long he was there. But he got laid off. And then within a week, he got pulled off the street again. And this time it was for Air France. And a few weeks later, someone from TWA called, and they were calling people back from the layoff, from the furlough. And he said, "No, I've got a really good job at Air France, and I'm happy there." And the guy was pretty militant, and he said, "Well, I'm going to put it in your file. If you ever try to come back to TWA, I'm going to make sure you don't get hired." So in the almost 60 years that I've been flying, first with Dad and then on my own benefits with Delta and then British Airways, all those years when we traveled as a family, we flew every airline except for TWA. But going back to Mom and Dad, he was really, really proud to allow her a life of leisure. She was able after we were born and settled in school, she was able to pursue her passion of baking, and she learned how to bake every kind of cake and decorate. She decorated the most beautiful cakes. A lot of you in this room have had her cakes, have had her make cakes for your daughters or occasions. She was world famous for her mocha tart, and she just loved it. And when Dad was done working at Air France, he put in his 30 years, and without discussing it with her, he retired, and then he was underfoot. But they found something in common. They loved playing poker. They used to play poker whenever we'd go to Arizona, Flagstaff, or Phoenix. There was always a poker game or 21 game going on, and they loved gambling. And so they started going to Las Vegas, and they went to Las Vegas at least 4 times a year. They'd stay for 7 to 10 days. And at the end of the year, Dad said he always came out ahead. And my dad was extremely good with finance. So if he said that he came out ahead, he did. And he figured out some kind of system to get ahead of them, even if it was just a little bit. And then when Mom's health started to fail, he doted on her. There wasn't anything that he wouldn't do. There wasn't anything that he wouldn't provide. Their world became very, very small. And the last several years before she passed, they stopped going to Las Vegas because they were afraid, Dad was afraid that something would happen, that he might lose her. And he was devoted to her and her care until we lost her very, very suddenly and very violently on September 8th, 2016. And he did. He lost a huge part of himself. And he was never the same. But he started to tell the stories again of how they met and their love affair. And I'm so grateful for those stories and all the stories that he told. I'm also really, really grateful for the great example that he set for my brother and I. Dad was ever generous. And despite what happened in the concentration camps, I think from there he learned that's where the generosity took seed and sprouted. Because ever since that time, he always makes sure that he had money. And if somebody needed money, he'd always lend them a hand, whether it was $1 or several $100s or several $1,000s. And if you needed a place to stay, we grew up, my brother and I, we never really had our own rooms. There was always lochets, aunts and uncles, and real family and just like family coming to stay with us for any length of time. The house was always open. In later years, the house was always messy, but it was always open, and it was always gezellig, and there was always a cup of coffee. I'm really proud to have followed in my dad's footsteps in a lot of ways. He started with Air France 3 months before I was born in March of 1961. And he retired exactly 30 years later in March of 1991. And I'll tell you, I worked the best job I ever had at British Airways. And I have to thank my dad for that, because growing up, I wanted to work for the airlines, and I did. I worked for Delta, and I enjoyed working at Delta. I worked in reservations, but at the time, you couldn't get to the airport. And so after a few years, I did leave Delta for reasons that a few of you know. But I left Delta, and then I got a job at Xerox. And I thought, I'm just going to be a 9-to-5 person and work there. And Dad pulled me aside one day and he said, you are never going to be happy in a 9-to-5 job. You have airlines in your blood, you have flying in your blood, you have travel in your blood. British Airways is hiring. Give me your resume. And Dad, at that time, he was working for Air France at LAX. He used to work, when he started, he worked at the ticket office in downtown Los Angeles. And that office closed in the, can't remember if it was the late 70s or the early 80s, but it closed. And so he started working at the airport. And he was in charge of finances there for the station managers. So the station managers came and went, but Dad was a fixture there. And he knew everybody. He knew everybody in customs, immigration. He knew all the secretaries there. He was able to get all kinds of goodies, whether it was airline memorabilia or interline tickets. He had the hookup at LAX. And he had found out from Jennifer Montsinger, who was the secretary at British Airways, that they were hiring. And so he walked my resume over there. And I got called in and got interviewed. And I started a 30-year career there, April 1987. And then in April 2017, that was 8 months after Mom passed away, I saw that Dad couldn't take care of himself completely independently anymore. So I got lucky, and they were offering severances at that time at British Airways. And so I followed in his footsteps, and I retired exactly 30 years later, April 1987. One other thing that I followed in his footsteps is my dad only knew and loved one woman, Mom. And I got married the first time to a lovely guy, Jeff, and we had 2 kids, but we weren't a good match. But in high school, I met somebody else, and we came in and out of our lives. It was never the right time for me, but for him, it was always the right time. And he waited. He waited through my indecision. He waited through my marriage and my having children. And I married someone exactly like my father, Norman, my husband, Norman. And I followed in my dad's footsteps that way again. And there's other little things that I have the same as my dad. I have a horrible temper. I have horrible ADD, just like he does. I do everything at the last minute, just like he does. When I first started working at British Airways, Dad and I carpooled together to LAX. And every morning, we were running. He was running, I was running. We'd barely make it into work on time. He didn't have a time clock to punch, but I did. But he was always running late, and I'm just like him, always running late. But I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to everything he taught me. To be generous, to have your house open to friends and family, to be a good listener, be a good ear, to always help when people need help. At this time, I want to say a big thank you also to a few really, really special people that have been great comfort to Dad and I after we lost Mom, and a great comfort to me and my family after we lost Dad. So, Omtinas, even though you're not here, I just want to thank you for coming every year for Dad's birthday and coming to stay and cooking. Mom loved when you'd come and cook. And thank you for exposing him to opera. And thank you for, in his very late stage of life, teaching him how to make babi ketchup and sambal goreng bonches and several other nice Indonesian dishes. And thank you, Omtinas, for coming last spring and coming to stay with us. When Dad was hit with COVID, he was hit really hard. Dad was an extremely stubborn, egoïstisch sometimes person, and he was afraid of the vaccines, and he thought the vaccine would be the end of him. So when he got COVID in early 2022, he was hospitalized. And for 5 weeks, we were on this horrible roller coaster. We weren't sure he was going to make it out, but he did. But by the time he did get out, his lungs were decimated, and he couldn't walk anymore. So we brought him home for hospice. Norman and I, we brought him home to Temple City. And Omtinas came that spring of 2022 for 5 weeks, and he cooked at least 5 days a week. And he'd cook at Dad's house. Norman would go and pick him up with all the pots and pans in a box, and we'd all have dinner together. Granted, it was in separate rooms, Omtinas and Dad in his room. Norman and I would be in the living room eating. Cody always wants to eat in his own room. But we'd all have dinner together and under one roof. And I thank you for that, Omtinas. And I thank you for the respite that you gave us, because we had almost none in those 4 months. I'm so grateful for you for coming and giving us all that help and strength. And I want to thank Dr. Ma and Americas Hospice for all the support that they gave us in those 4 months. Dr. Ma, thank you for listening to me and taking calls from Dad when he was confused and afraid, and always being there. He cared for you so much. You meant so much to him.
I thank you so much. I'll always be grateful for the wonderful care that you took of him. And I want to especially thank Rosemary and Cora and Mike and Alex. Those were the people who bathed my dad and checked all his vitals and made sure that he was okay and were available to answer questions for me as well. And Rosemary was there when we got him home on February 17th. And when we were losing him, she came back. So Dad had somebody familiar to help us say goodbye. Lastly, I want to thank Yoka. Yoka has been mine and my father's rock for more years than I can name. She was his other daughter. She's my sister. She's my best friend. And when Dad had to vent about things and I couldn't listen anymore, he would call Yoka. And he'd lean on her shoulders. And she was always there for us. We had so many good times together, our families. Yoka is the daughter of my dad's oldest brother, Day, who we lost in the early 90s. And we have a lot of cousins. My mom and dad both came from a family of 6. But the cousins, and I love all my cousins, but the cousins that I am most closest to are the ones from Sandfort. Yoka, Werner, Jose. And my dad was closest to them as well. They were his children too. And Yoke, I couldn't have made it through my mother's arrangements without you. Yoka flew over here 2 days. She was here 2 days after Mom died. And it was hard because Mom died 2 days before Mom and Dad's 60th wedding anniversary, and Dad was devastated. So to have her here was a huge comfort. And she's come back again. After Dad died, we were on the phone all the time. I wasn't sure what to do. After 4 months, Norman and I taking care of him for 4 months and watching him bravely battle this horrible, horrible COVID and its results, the devastating results on your body. We were spent. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know when to have this service. We didn't know what to do. And Yoka's been there to help me with it. And so that's why we chose to bury him 6 years to the day after Mom was buried, and have the memorial today on which would have been his 92nd birthday. And just to have you here again and help me with everything, arranging the pictures, getting everything together, keeping me from losing my mind. I'm so grateful. And I hope you know how much Dad loved and adored you. So I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry if it was long, and I'm sorry I wasn't prepared, but when it comes to my father, there's just too much, and I just can't get it all out. So I want to thank you all for for bearing with me, and I want to thank you all for coming to see this lovely little sea of plaid flannel shirts and a couple Hawaiian shirts. I'm so grateful, and Dad would have gotten a really big kick out of it. And so everybody who's listening to the stream, if you haven't already gotten up and gone to the bathroom or gotten coffee or just walked away, thank you for staying with us. And Werner, we miss you. Omtinus, we miss you. We wish you could have been here, both of you. And all the rest of the family, we love you and we miss you. And now we're going to walk over to the reception area, and we're going to enjoy some risoles and pastiches. And I have been saving 2 huge spekkoek for months to serve to all of you in honor of Dad. I love you guys all so much. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody on the stream, I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. So you guys are welcome to get up. I'm sure you're hungry. There's coffee and little Indo bites and lovely spekkoek, just like my mother used to make next door.
Okay, we are there, short guy, get going. Oh, it's a horse. That's great.
Like you were falling asleep.
Oops. Right again. What happened? There we go. There we go. Whoops. Party. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. My dad was known for wearing flannel and Hawaiian shirts after he retired. That's all he wore. Flannel and. Oh, okay. No worries. Yeah, no worries.
I almost, but it wouldn't, it wasn't gonna be appropriate.
Yeah.
But I had to just wear a black
Yeah,
t-shirt.
it would have been
It
perfect.
would have been perfect. See, there was.
Yeah, see? But Susie, come next to our kids' sister and take it home.
Okay.
Or do you want me to just drop some off at